wouldn't believe the strange things soldiers collected during World War II. War is not just the roar of guns and strategic maps in headquarters. It is millions of hours spent in damp earth, under endless rain, waiting. It was in these inhuman conditions that remarkable ingenuity was born, turning trash into tools for survival. Soldiers on the front lines became engineers, cooks, shoemakers, and even artists. Heroism was evident not only in attacks, but also in the quiet daily struggle against cold, mud, and domestic disarray. Resourcefulness became the main weapon, no less important than a rifle. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how an ordinary tin can was turned into a smokeless stove, and a piece of silk from the sky was valued more than gold. I will reveal to you a secret that was worth its weight in gold behind enemy lines. Every downed aircraft or parachute drop left behind a valuable resource. Dozens of square meters of thin, but incredibly durable silk. For soldiers, and especially for partisans, this material became a real treasure, a multifunctional survival tool. First of all, parachute silk was the perfect material for improving and repairing clothing. It was used to sew light but warm linings for jackets, scarves, and even underwear. Silk retained heat well and was much more comfortable against the skin than rough and scratchy army wool. Parachute slings, woven from durable nylon, were no less valuable. These ropes could withstand enormous loads and found hundreds of uses in soldiers' daily lives. They were used to build shelters, set snares for small game, and as sturdy shoelaces. In the field, when there was a shortage of medicines, clean silk fabric could be used as bandages. Its smooth texture did not stick to damaged tissue as much as ordinary cotton. It was an emergency solution, but sometimes the only one available. A unique use of silk was in the manufacture of maps for pilots and scouts. Unlike paper, such a map did not get wet in the rain, did not tear, and did not make a telltale rustling sound. It could be crumpled into a small ball, hidden, and then easily smoothed out. For pilots or paratroopers who found themselves in enemy territory, the parachute canopy itself became the basis for a camp. Stretched between trees, it turned into a reliable shelter from rain and wind. The white silk of winter parachutes served as ideal camouflage in the snow. In addition to its practical use, silk became a kind of currency. In villages ravaged by war, it could be exchanged with local residents for food, information, or help. The beautiful and durable fabric was highly valued in conditions of total scarcity. Even the smallest scraps and threads were not wasted. Silk threads were used to weave strong fishing lines. Tiny scraps served as excellent tinder for lighting fires in wet weather. Thus, the parachute was not just a means of rescue, but a whole survival kit. It provided clothing, ropes, shelter, and even medical supplies. This gift from heaven saved thousands of lives far from home. We are very interested in hearing your point of view. What do you think about how the value of everyday things changes in extreme conditions? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about how soldiers made fire in the damp hell of the trenches? In the conditions of frontline life, fire was everything. It provided warmth, hot food, and light. But ordinary matches instantly became damp in the constant mud and moisture of the trenches, rendering them useless. The solution to this problem was one of the most widespread soldier inventions, the trench lighter. This device was ingenious in its simplicity and reliability. It was assembled literally from rubbish lying underfoot on any battlefield. The base for the body was a regular brass cartridge case from a rifle or pistol cartridge. Brass did not rust, was durable, and was easy to work with using a knife or bayonet. The inside of the cartridge case was tightly packed with a wick made from any materials at hand. Twisted threads from a greatcoat, pieces of rope, or even medical cotton wool were used. The wick was soaked in any available combustible liquid, gasoline, kerosene, or alcohol. The most difficult element of the design was the striker for striking a spark. It was made from a piece of a file, a needle file, or any other piece of hardened steel. Special stones from captured or pre-war lighters were used as flint. The height of ingenuity was the creation of a wheel for striking sparks. It was carved out of a coin or metal button, carefully notched for better grip. This detail required patience and skill, but the result was worth it. The assembled structure was practically indestructible and was not afraid of moisture or falls. Such a lighter could serve its owner for months, requiring only periodic refueling. It was a symbol of soldiers' independence from the vagaries of supply. The manufacture of such lighters became a real trenchcraft. Craftsmen exchanged. Fire was necessary, but in trench warfare, it was important not only to be able to produce it, but also to see what was happening behind the parapet without risking one's life. Are you ready to learn how a simple mirror and 2 sticks saved hundreds of lives every day? Continue to the next chapter. What you have never seen is the battlefield through the eyes of a soldier sitting at the bottom of a trench. Any attempt to stick your head out from behind the parapet to assess the situation was deadly dangerous. It was this daily threat that gave rise to a simple but ingenious invention: the trench periscope. This device allowed soldiers to observe enemy positions while remaining completely safe. Factory-made Army periscopes were complex, expensive, and not available to everyone. Therefore, soldiers began to mass-produce their own handmade versions. The design of a homemade periscope was extremely simple and required only ingenuity and a couple of handy items. Any long stick, board, or even a rifle barrel with the bolt removed served as the base. The main thing was to ensure the necessary height for viewing. The key elements were 2 small mirrors, which could be obtained in various ways. Mirrors from women's powder compacts, pocket shaving mirrors, or even carefully polished pieces of metal were used. These items became a strategically important resource. The mirrors were attached to the ends of a stick at a 45-degree angle to each other. The upper mirror looked at the enemy and the lower one at the observer. Thus, the beam of light was reflected twice, and the soldier could see everything that was happening above the trench. The mirrors were attached with wire, rope, straps, or simply by cutting grooves for them in the wooden base. Some craftsmen created complex folding structures that could be easily transported. The simplicity of the design meant that such a device could be repaired literally on the spot. Even the most primitive periscope radically changed the situation. It made it possible to constantly monitor no man's land, notice enemy movements, and prepare for an attack. This turned passive defense into active surveillance. Simple aiming devices, such as a front sight made from a nail, were often attached to periscopes. This allowed soldiers to fire from behind cover without exposing themselves to return fire. Such shooting was inaccurate, but it exerted strong psychological pressure on the enemy. Soldiers' ingenuity found simple answers to deadly challenges. The ability to see while remaining invisible was one of the key arts of survival. What if I showed you how an ordinary watch could become a tool for finding your way? In combat, especially in unfamiliar terrain or behind enemy lines, the ability to navigate was equivalent to life. Standard compasses could be lost or damaged, so every soldier had to be able to determine the points of the compass with improvised means. The most well-known method was to use a wristwatch with hands. To do this, the watch was placed horizontally and the hour hand was pointed directly at the sun. The line dividing the angle between the hour hand and the 12 mark indicated the direction of south. This method was accurate enough for most situations and worked in any clear weather. It did not require any special equipment other than what many soldiers had on their wrists. This skill was part of the mandatory training for scouts and saboteurs. If there was no watch, an equally ancient and reliable method was used: the shadow of a stick. Any straight branch was stuck vertically into the ground, and the end of its shadow was marked with a stone. After 15-20 minutes, when the shadow shifted, a second mark was made. The line connecting these 2 marks indicated the direction from west to east. The first mark was always in the west, and the second in the east. Knowing this, it was easy to determine the other points of the compass. In cloudy weather or at night, these methods did not work, and then pure ingenuity came to the rescue. It was possible to create an improvised compass if you had a sewing needle and a piece of silk or wool at hand. To do this, the needle was repeatedly passed in one direction across the fabric to magnetize it. The magnetized needle was carefully placed on a leaf or piece of bark. This construction was lowered into any container with calm water, a puddle, a pot, or a helmet. Floating freely, the needle turned under the influence of the Earth's magnetic field and pointed north. The ability to find your way was vital, but it was equally important to maintain your strength. In the next chapter, we will talk about how a simple tin can could replace an entire field kitchen. Are you ready to find out what Tommy Cook is? It was practically impossible to set up a full-fledged field kitchen at the front. Delivering hot food to the trenches was extremely risky. Therefore, British soldiers, known as Tommies, invented an ingenious device for individual cooking: the Tommy cooker. The basis of this invention was an ordinary empty tin can from condensed milk, jam, or canned meat. Such cans were part of the standard ration and were always available in abundance. They were durable and the perfect size for creating a mini stove. The secret of the Tommy cooker was fuel that did not give away its position with smoke. Instead of firewood, soldiers used rope, strips of fabric, or corrugated cardboard. This material was laid in a special spiral pattern inside the empty tin can. The fuel most often used was melted fat from canned meat or any other available fat. The wick made of rope or cardboard was thoroughly soaked in this mixture. This design produced an even, almost smokeless flame that could burn for a long time. The manufacturing process was very simple and did not require any special tools. An empty and clean can was filled with a wick, which was then poured over with melted fat. After the fat solidified, a large trench candle was obtained, ready for use. Such an improvised stove could work wonders in trench conditions. It was possible to boil a mug of water for tea, heat up the contents of a can of stew, or fry biscuits. To do this, a metal mug or a pot lid was placed on top of the can. This small stove not only provided hot food, but also a little precious warmth. In a damp dugout, even such a small flame could warm frozen hands. It was a tiny haven of comfort and normal life amid the chaos of war. Tommy Cook became so popular and effective that his description could even be found in official survival manuals. Soldiers were advised to make such devices to maintain their strength and health. The simplicity and availability of materials made it an indispensable companion for British soldiers. This story is a vivid example of how resourcefulness can turn ordinary rubbish into a valuable resource. An empty tin can, which in peacetime would have ended up in a landfill, became the heart of a soldier's life during the war. It gave the soldier a little bit of human comfort. Soldiers' ingenuity found a way out of any situation, proving that the will to live can work wonders. Tommy Cook is not just a device, but a symbol of human adaptability. It proves that even in hell, you can brew yourself a cup of hot tea. Ready to learn about the thing that gave light and warmth to thousands of soldiers in dark dugouts? Long nights in the trenches were filled not only with cold, but also with absolute darkness. Any open source of light, be it a fire or a lantern, could instantly attract the enemy's attention. Soldiers needed a safe, compact, and most importantly, smokeless source of light. The solution was found in the form of a simple design called a trench candle. It required the simplest of materials to make: an empty tin can, cardboard, and paraffin. The manufacturing process was extremely simple and accessible to everyone. A strip of corrugated cardboard from ammunition or food boxes was rolled into a tight roll. This roll was tightly inserted into a low tin can, for example, from canned fish. Then this structure was filled with melted paraffin or wax. Paraffin could be obtained from ordinary candles, which were part of a soldier's supplies, or from other sources. The cardboard, like a sponge, was completely saturated with the combustible composition. After the paraffin hardened, the product was ready for use. Such a candle burned for a very long time, from 4 to 8 hours, giving an even and fairly bright flame. Most importantly, it produced almost no smoke, which made its use on the front lines relatively safe. The trench candle was a multifunctional device. It illuminated the dark dugout, allowing soldiers to write letters home, clean their weapons, or play cards. This small island of light in the pitch darkness had enormous psychological significance. How many people today do you think would be able to make such a simple thing in the field? In the next chapter, we will talk about how soldiers solved another important problem, protecting their main tool, their weapons, from dirt and moisture. In trench warfare, a soldier's main enemy was not only the enemy, but also the ubiquitous dirt. Dirt, sand, and water clogged the rifle mechanism, causing delays in firing. At a critical moment in battle, weapon failure could be very costly. The barrel was a particularly vulnerable spot. Even a small amount of dirt or snow getting into it when firing could cause the barrel to swell or even rupture. Therefore, keeping the barrel clean was a top priority. Standard means of protecting the muzzle were often unavailable or inconvenient. Soldiers once again resorted to ingenuity, using the most unexpected improvised means. It was necessary to find a material that would seal the barrel tightly but would not interfere with firing in an emergency. One of the most effective and unexpected solutions was the use of medical rubber products. Soldiers pulled them over the end of the barrel. The thin and elastic rubber reliably protected the barrel from moisture, dust, and dirt. This solution was ingenious in its simplicity. The rubber cover fit snugly around the barrel and did not slip off during movement. When it was necessary to fire a shot, it did not need to be removed. The bullet easily pierced the thin rubber without changing its trajectory. Such improvised covers were especially popular with soldiers participating in amphibious operations. When landing from the sea or crossing rivers, weapons inevitably came into contact with water. A simple rubber cap ensured that the rifle remained operational. It was so effective that soldiers from all armies adopted it. This technique became a classic example of a soldier's life hack born out of dire necessity. It proved that sometimes the simplest and most unexpected object is suitable for solving a complex technical problem. In addition, pieces of oiled cloth or tarpaulin were used to protect the bolt and other mechanisms. Weapons were wrapped in them during long marches or in bad weather. Caring for a rifle was as much a daily and mandatory ritual as eating. An experienced soldier knew that his life depended directly on the condition of his weapon. Therefore, he was ready to go to any lengths to keep it in perfect order. This care was a manifestation of the highest professionalism. The cleanliness of a weapon was a matter of survival. Soldiers learned this simple principle from their first day on the front lines, and their ingenuity found new ways to follow this rule. War is not only destruction. Paradoxically, even in the most terrible conditions, the human desire for creation and beauty does not fade. This gave rise to a unique phenomenon: trench art. Soldiers collected the gifts of war, spent cartridges, shell fragments, and aircraft wreckage. In their hands, these deadly objects were transformed into something completely different. They became material for creativity, a way to rethink the surrounding reality. Brass shell casings were used to make elegant vases. The names of battle sites, dates, names of comrades, or simply beautiful patterns were engraved on their surfaces. This work required perseverance and distracted from heavy thoughts during moments of calm. Bullets and rifle cartridge cases were turned into lighters, mouthpieces, pens, and keychains. Copper and brass were malleable materials, and soldiers used simple tools to create true masterpieces of miniature art. They kept these items as talismans or sent them home as souvenirs. Rings, bracelets, and cigarette cases were carved from the aluminum wreckage of downed aircraft. This light and shiny metal was highly prized. Often, factory stamps or serial numbers were preserved on such items as a reminder of their origin. This creativity was not just a way to pass the time, it had a deep psychological meaning. By transforming an object intended for destruction into something beautiful and useful, soldiers asserted their power over the chaos of war, symbolically defeating it. Trench art became a form of therapy, a way to cope with stress and preserve one's humanity. Each flower engraved on a shell casing was a small victory of life over death. It was a silent protest against the madness that was happening around them. Many of these items were created in hospitals by wounded soldiers. Working with their hands helped them rehabilitate, restoring their interest in life. The things they created became a testament to their resilience. Today, these items are valuable historical artifacts. They hold the personal stories of nameless soldiers, their hopes and experiences. Looking at an elegant vase made from a shell casing, we see not only war, but also the indomitable human spirit. Trench art proves that even in the deepest darkness, people seek light. It was not just a hobby, but a way of saying, I am still here. I am human. I can create, not just destroy. The most dangerous enemy in war was not the enemy, but what was going on in the soldier's head. Constant stress, fear, and separation from home could break anyone. Therefore, soldiers unconsciously gathered and built psychological armor for themselves. One of its main elements was black humor. Soldiers joked about death, danger, and the absurdity of what was happening. These jokes, which would seem terrible to any civilian, served as a lightning rod in the trenches, allowing tension to be released. The ability to laugh in the face of danger was a form of protest against inhuman conditions. It was a way to stay sane and not give in to despair. Soldiers' jokes, stories, and songs helped maintain the morale of the entire unit. Another pillar of psychological resilience was a strict routine. Strict adherence to the daily schedule, getting up, cleaning weapons, eating on a schedule, created the illusion of order and control. These simple, repetitive actions structured time and prevented thoughts from wandering. Soldiers learned to live one day at a time, without looking too far into the future. They rejoiced in the simplest things: hot food, dry foot cloths, a minute of silence. This focus on the here and now helped them not to go crazy with anxiety. Soldiers kept diaries, wrote poetry, and drew pictures. It was a way to record their experiences, vent their emotions, and leave a mark. Creativity became a form of self-analysis and a salvation from inner emptiness. It was these invisible techniques of psychological self-defense that were the very armor that protected the soldier's soul. Without it, even the most perfect equipment was useless. Ultimately, this war was won not by those who were fearless, but by those who learned to cope with their fear. One of the most insidious dangers of trench warfare was not bullets, but so-called trench foot. This condition, caused by prolonged exposure of the feet to cold and dampness, had serious consequences. As a result, thousands of soldiers were put out of action without even being wounded. The conditions in the trenches were ideal for the development of this problem. Constant dampness, cold water accumulating at the bottom of the trenches, and the inability to dry shoes posed a serious threat. Soldiers' feet were in wet and dirty boots for days on end. In the early stages, the disease manifested itself in loss of sensation and tingling. Then the feet swelled and became covered with ulcers. In advanced cases, this could lead to very serious health consequences. The command of all armies quickly realized the scale of the problem, as losses from trench foot sometimes exceeded combat losses. Combating it became a priority. Compliance with hygiene rules was equated with compliance with combat orders. The basis of prevention was a simple but difficult instruction. Keep your feet dry and warm. Soldiers were ordered to carry at least 2 pairs of spare socks or foot cloths. Wet socks had to be changed for dry ones at least once a day. To this end, a whole system was set up based on the soldier's ingenuity. While one pair was on their feet, the soldier dried the other on his own body under his undershirt. This primitive method was the only one possible in the absence of fires. These simple measures significantly reduced the number of illnesses. Changing socks, using fat, and regular checkups saved more soldiers than many medical remedies. This was a case where prevention proved to be more important than treatment. We have considered only a small part of the tricks that helped soldiers survive the hell of World War II. Behind each of these inventions, from the bullet casing lighter to trench art, lies not only ingenuity, but also an unyielding will to live. These stories show that the human spirit is capable of adapting to any conditions, even the most unimaginable ones. War brings out the worst in humanity, but it also sometimes reveals the best: mutual aid, ingenuity, and incredible resilience. The experiences of soldiers of that time are a harsh lesson in how important it is to appreciate peace and the simple things that seem like real treasures in the trenches. Which of these soldier inventions did you find most ingenious? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes.